Likkutei Torah, Behar, page Mem, second column midway. Now the Rebbe was explaining that Pitzchuli Achesi Rayosi, Hashem says, open up to me, my sister, my friend. So the Rebbe explains, what does it mean, Achesi? There's a natural, instinctive relationship between brother and sister. In addition to that, Achesi also means, like he said, sewing or weaving in a way that two separate things become one. And that, it represents the Ava that a Jew has to Hashem, but a Jew needs to open it up because it's blocked. That hidden love that a Jew naturally has becomes blocked. So therefore the Jew needs to open it up. How do you open it up? So he says through davening and learning. Then he says, then it comes to the second level, Rayosi. Rayosi means my friend, but it also means my shepherd. Meaning, as he explains, the Yidden, the Jews, give Hashem sustenance. Now what does it mean, sustenance? Sustenance like bread, that bread keeps the body, the neshama in the body. So the sustenance of a Jew to Hashem is keeping Hashem in the world, and that is through the level of Torah, which is called bread. But then he says, in order to understand that in a spiritual level, we need to understand how you make bread in the physical level. And he quotes the Mishnah that explains that in the Melachos of Shabbos, the Gemara says, the pas noket. The Mishnah goes in the process of making bread. So he doesn't go through all of them, but he says there's two parts. There's planting, grinding, kneading the dough, and baking it. So he says, what is planting? The seed is put into the ground. You dig a hole in the ground, you plow, then you put the seed in, then you cover it. Now in order for the seed to grow, it needs to rot. It has to germinate. And then it grows up from a wheat seed, from an apple seed, an apple. Now even though the seed has absolutely no taste of the apple, smell the apple, taste and looks of the wheat, nothing. Nevertheless, when the seed rots, it becomes the vegetation power in that seed to create an apple rots, so it becomes bottled to the power of vegetation in the earth. So when you have the power of the seed, which is the potential of the apple, there's no apple in the seed, it doesn't look or taste or anything of the apple, but it has the potential of the apple. That potential becomes bottled, so then it is able to grow a tree. That's what we're up to now.
So in order for apple to come out, the seed has to be rot.
Not the seed, it has to rot. You don't take a rotten seed, you take a good seed.
It has to rot.
Correct. Which is the concept of bittul that becomes completely nullified into the power of vegetation that the earth has.
The concept of bittul, the concept of suffer.
Bittul.
It has to rot proper.
The seed doesn't suffer when it rots. Why does it suffer?
It rots.
Okay, let's see it. This whole mashal that he just gave will be understood. Now we can understand how it works in the spiritual realm of Torah. Torah is the will and the wisdom and will of Hashem. Hashem is the level of Chachma, not in our known form of Chachma. It's only the source of Chachma. And this level of godliness comes down lower, 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 until it comes until it comes down into physical objects. For commercial, that's the marshal of the Zad Gadin Azera, like the seed of the wheat, or apir shenil kach mikerach hatzemeach shakirach hu bechinas ayim mamish. That level of potential is mamish the level of ayin. Like it says, interesting, tatshe haaretz desha. Tatshe haaretz desha means the earth should sprout out vegetation. Now tatshe, he says, is two words. Eish das. By Torah it says, Miminai eish das lamai. in Zeis Bracha, right? Eish das means a fiery law, which Torah is likened to fire. But tatshe, the earth should sprout out vegetation. The word tatshe is eish das, which refers to Torah. V'apri anitzmach mimenu. Therefore, it says like this. When a seed creates a tree, so the seed, like we said, has to germinate, it has to rot. So it becomes ayin. Now from this ayin comes a tree, which is yesh mi'ayin, or a wheat bush, or a wheat plant, whatever. It's all yesh mi'ayin. It still has a spiritual, even though it's bittul, it still has a ruchniistic chayis. Ketev l'maychel v'nechman l'mayr is good to eat and good to look at. Or sheyesh beiruach, or it has a smell to it. It creates a fruit that has taste and smell, and texture and everything. Mash'en kin garden and nizra, but the seed that you plant in the ground before it becomes the fruit, ha'chayis shebei mitzumtum kol kach. There's no taste or smell at all. In other words, again, he's saying you take a seed which germinates, that anyway the seed has no taste and smell of the fruit. You can't eat an apple seed and taste apple. It doesn't feel like apple, doesn't look like it, doesn't smell nothing. Yet it rots in the ground, and out comes an apple tree, which is yesh mi'ayin, because in the seed is the potential to create this taste and smell and look and everything.
Isn't yesh mi'ayin means something from nothing?
Right. So relatively speaking, when a tree comes out of a seed which germinates, which rots, out comes a tree.
But it's a seed.
The seed is nothing.
Seed is nothing.
Relatively speaking. And it rots. It's even more nothing. Yeah? So, and out comes a tree. So he said, Torah that comes into gashmiistic things, it's a very limited level of Torah. Why? Keep Gan Eden ha'elyon, which is Elam Abriya Me'idim, Shom Chabad Ein Tzabarchu, or Me'er Torah B'chinis Taida Gasogas Sichlis Alukus Mamash. Says like this, Gan Eden, the higher level of Gan Eden is the world of Bria. In Bria is shining Bina of Elokus, Bina of Atzilus. So it's the level of understanding. So the real enjoyment of Torah is really in Gan Eden, where you have a revelation of Bina. Down here, Torah is very hidden. You have to have an effort in Torah. You have to actually have Yigiyah b'Torah to get to feel the Kedusha, the revelation, the uniqueness of Torah. So it has to be limited. So down here, Torah comes down in a very limited form, like the seed. Because there's very little Torah. Then, the but this level down here, which is an extremely nullified level of Chochmah compared to the way they feel Torah in Gan Eden, when Torah comes down here, it comes down here. Yeah. So you're learning Torah, you're learning about a court case between Reuven and Shimon, and one of them is lying, and this guy's doing this, and this guy's saying that, and this whole thing. You don't feel Torah, the Kedusha of Torah, like they learn it in Gan Eden. It's a very, very limited level of enjoying godliness. You might enjoy a seichel-dika thing, but not a godly seichel.
Isn't Bria beginning of Yesh?
Correct, but again, relatively speaking, in Bria is revealed, Yud is revealed in Atzilus, Hey in Bria, Vav in Yetzirah, Hey in Asiyah. So the way Torah comes down here into the Gashmistika world, dealing with physical low objects of thieves and liars and swindlers, You can't say this is the Kedusha of Torah, that this guy is lying. Or that this pig is treif.
But the way you dissect it through many Mefarshim, that's very, that's...
That is also a very
interesting.
limited level of understanding Torah compared to what is in Gan Eden. And when Mashiach comes, it's going to be Torah Chadash Me'itei Teitzei. It's going to be a completely different aspect of Torah, that all the Torah we have here is nothing compared to that level of Torah.
Gan Eden, Yesh.
Everything is relative. Compared to Atzilus, it's yes. Compared to down here, it's bittul. Who's more bottled to Hashem down here, Malachim or us?
Down here.
Malachim are. Okay. But they're in the world of Bria, because we're all the way in Asiya, yeah? But we originate in Atzilus. So we're greater than them in the source. But down here, we're lower than them. This is what we say in Tilim, but we say in by benching. Hazer and Bedimo, those that plant with tears, Berina Yiksedu will harvest with joy. Why? At the time you learn, you don't have that spiritual tainig of elokus. You might have an intellectual enjoyment, but that's not a godly enjoyment. Remember, we learned many times, there's inanimate plant, animal, and human. The purpose of everything is to go higher, which means inanimate water is used to water a plant. It makes the plant grow, so it becomes part of the plant. Plants are eaten by animals, becomes the growth of the animal, it becomes elevated from plant to animal. Animals are eaten by human, so it becomes blood and flesh, so we elevate it from animal to human. Now where does human go? Human is the level of intellect. The uniqueness of a person over an animal is that we have seichel. Now if the human is the epitome of creation and has seichel, where does a human go up to? So the answer is, the human goes from humanity to godly. From human to godly. That means, from intellectual seichel, the way you elevate yourself, because if it's still human intelligence, you're not going up. Maybe you're becoming a better intellectual, but you're not really elevating to a new level, like animal to human and plant to animal. So where does a person go up to? A Yid, let's talk about Yid. Where does a Yid go up to? He goes up from human seichel to godly seichel. But at the time you're learning, you're only getting human seichel. And he says, because again, what do? We feed Hashem. So when we learn, we're planting the seed, so they plant the seed up there because Hashem does what we do. The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah in Gan Eden. They understand their godly intellect. That level of understanding in Gan Eden. Okay? So basically, the purpose is, and that's what it says, Azer and Bedima, you plant with tears, spiritually speaking, means, crying is basically a form of bittul, because you realize you're not getting what you need to get. Right? That's generally the concept of protest. What happens if you have tears of joy? It's protest.
No.
So it's not.
No.
So you can't say a statement that tears are protest.
Yeah.
Okay. So when by a person crying, which is the level of bittul basically, then berina yiksedu. Because when the seed rots, bedima, So then the outcome of it is you create this beautiful Torah tree, which is understanding in Gan Eden.
So this refers to bittul, right?
And ultimately, it goes even more to Tchias HaMesim, which is even a greater level.
This refers to bittul, right?
Yes. Therefore, like we said before, if you learn Torah without this bittul, it's no good. It's total evil.
Doesn't sink.
No, like we said, why was I to solve the story? Because they didn't say Berchas HaTorah, right? The Gemara in the Dar. They didn't say Berchas HaTorah. So, what does that mean they didn't say Berchas HaTorah? It doesn't say they didn't learn. They learned. So if I put on tefillin without saying the bracha, I still did the mitzvah. What's the difference? Why is it so bad? So Rabbi again explains, because the whole learning of Torah can only be learned properly when you have the realization that it's nice in HaTorah, that it's God's Torah. Meaning as follows: when you realize, and that's what Berchas HaTorah are all about, you realize that it's God's infinite wisdom, and my brilliant wisdom that we all think we are, is totally limited. You could be a million Einsteins put together, and yet it's still a limited amount of seichel. So when the intellect, the limited intellect, is trying to get infinite intellect, then you realize that whatever I learn is really nothing. I really don't get it. And therefore the attitude is that, like we said many times, it's not that Torah doesn't make sense, it's I don't make sense. And the wonder is, and the miracle that Hashem does when we learn Torah is not what we don't understand. That's a given. How can finite understand infinite wisdom? The miracle and the chesed that Hashem does is Torah limits itself in such a limited form, as Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that every human mind can grasp Torah. That's a maiden dika chiddush. But that can only be done when you have the bittul before l'mal alam be'emo beretzes bezeir. You have to have bittul, and then you start learning, because the bittul makes us realize that what Torah is not something I have to understand, and if I don't understand the Torah, I got to be wrong because my great brain doesn't get it. Yeah, some people are stupid enough that they say it. The Torah doesn't make sense. People that are a little bit more intellectual, more, the smarter, they just think it. They have enough brains not to say it.
But the Torah has come to our level of seichel. Why is the miracle to learn it? To be able
Because how can a finite mind grasp infinite
because
wisdom?
It's become finite.
Now it's still, no, Torah remains infinite in the finite state.
But Hashem has not, the way that
Hashem, that's only Hashem.
It's all human.
B'makim she'atameitzik d'losi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shomatameitzik amvinsanusi. The Rebbe says in Tanya Perek Daled that this level of Hashem's infinite greatness is able to come into finite Torah. When the Alter Rebbe printed, when they were printing Tanya, and the Alter Rebbe sent for a few people to give a hefskim, haskam on it. So 3 of them are in the beginning.
What year was that?
Huh?
What year was that?
Look, 17 some.
100 years.
Anyway, so the Berditchever said, look at this book. He took such an infinite God and put him into a finite book. Torah is taking, Torah is taking infinite wisdom into a finite book. But in the finite book, it's infinite. Well, there's mentioned many times a famous story with the Bill Parich. Samach Tzedek once said a Maimer. The Bill Parich had a disagreement what the Samach Tzedek said with the Samach Tzedek's kids. Samach Tzedek's kids learned the Maimer one way, and the Bill Parich learned it a different way. So he said, you know what? Let's go ask the man himself. So the kids were able to go into their father when they wanted, right? They went into the Alter Rebbe with the Bill Parich. To the Samach Tzedek with their Bill Parich. They asked the Samach Tzedek, said, what did he mean? And he said he meant like the kids meant, like the kids said, not like Rabbi. So he turned to Rabbi. No, he said, no, I'm still right. He said, how could you be right? He said it, Come on. He said, when the Rebbe says a maimer, it's the Shechina speaking through his throat. Shechina medaberes mitoich grein. It's a lukus coming down through the Rebbe, is the microphone that is speaking. Once he says the maimer, it becomes Torah. He could learn his interpretation of Torah, I could learn my interpretation of Torah, and we could both be right.
Shem Parmatar.
You have that, you saw this also by the Rebbe. The Rebbe used to come down to something. Initially, the Rebbe used to come down Shabbos morning to davening with a Tanya. It was very interesting. The Rebbe had a very interesting seder. Shabbos morning he used to come to davening. I'm talking about in the Chovs, in the early Lamas. The Rebbe used to come down to davening with a Tanya. When the Binyan got to Baruch Shomar, the Rebbe opened the Tanya. I was learning in Tanya until Vayivaro David. This is what it looks like. He learned until he looked in Tanya until Vayivaro David. Then he closed the Tanya and he caught up very quickly. But there were times the Rebbe would bring down the Likkutei of that week, the Likkutei Sichos of that week, before he pounded into the books. It was all individual pamphlet. And the Rebbe would come to the davening. You saw middle of davening, the Rebbe was learning Likkutei Sichos that he just edited. And so the question is, he said it, he edited it, he definitely knew what it says in it. What in the world is he looking at it again for? So the answer is, once something becomes Torah, it becomes infinite. That means even when the finite mind is learning Torah, he could keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper in it, even though it's a finite, because Torah in essence is infinite, even though it comes down here. But what Al Rebbe is saying is, Torah comes down in a way that it comes down that a limited mind can grasp it while remaining infinite. Infinite. Not that much more finite. It remains infinite in the finite state, which obviously only Hashem could do.
It's a little bit of a contradiction, because at the beginning we said the Torah is, it can be infinite, all these physical...
No, we didn't say that.
You did?
No, he didn't say that at all. Now, the Rebbe said, Torah comes into Gashmiistic level. Therefore, when you learn it, initially, you don't see godliness in it, you only see intellectual aspects in it.
But it's still infinite.
Of course it's infinite. Torah is infinite.
And it's still a miracle.
Is Hashem... let's go, simple. Is Hashem's wisdom infinite? Is Torah Hashem's wisdom? Therefore, in geometry, A equals B equals, So, Hashem's wisdom is infinite. Torah is Hashem's wisdom. Therefore, is Torah infinite? Yes. How could Torah come into a finite level then? How could Torah come into a finite level? When a kid learns the pasuk, Bereshis bara Elokim, yes? In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, yes? And he gets 100 on the test, yes? He gets 100 to find each word. Did that kid learn Torah?
Yes.
Did he understand it?
Not really.
No, on his level, did he understand it?
Yes.
He got 100 on the test. It's not the fake mark.
Right.
It's not that you pay money to get into the high schools and colleges.
Doesn't mean he knows
Okay.
what
The kid knows Torah and his level 100% of an understanding. Yet the Rabbi Kivas didn't begin understanding it, and this didn't begin understanding it. Is that a contradiction? No. Torah comes down on a finite level. The kid understands it. When you get older, you learn Chumash when you're 10, 15, 20, 30. So you understand it on a deeper level. And halachically, are you getting a mitzvah of knowing Torah? Not fake. Are you getting a mitzvah of knowing Torah? Yes, you are. What you know is nothing, it's infinite. Torah's greatness is, Hashem takes infinite wisdom, lowers it down into a finite level, that when a mind understands it, you are connecting to the essence of God. But in that finite is infinite. Now let's take it a step further, coming back to the seeds. This seed has infinite potential.
Information too.
This seed has infinite potential. Why? This seed plants a tree, then you take the seeds from that tree and plant another tree. And not only that, all it takes to plant a tree is one seed. as long as it, takes the hold, right? So one tree can plant probably technically 1 million trees. And for all generations. One little fire could burn down the world. One tiny fire, a finite fire. So in this seed, realistically, it can only plant one tree. It could only plant an apple tree, not an orange tree. Correct? But the potential in this seed is infinite. And that's because the power of vegetation that exists in the earth is infinite. God put it there forever. And therefore, when the seed germinates and becomes bottled to the power of vegetation that the earth has, it has this infinite power. Mankind, parents create a child who create a child who create a child to the end of all times.
That's why there can never be a shortage of food in this world.
I just saw a vart, somebody said, there's enough resources on the world for people's need, not for their greed. It's a very profound it's a very profound concept.
Very, very good.
I just saw it the other day.
It really is. And everything in life.
If Hashem made, everybody wonders, Tchias HaMesim, so many people are going to get up. How is the world going to handle it? It's overpopulated as it is. You think the Eibishter can't figure it out? He can figure it out.
So, yeah.
Okay, this is now